So Pearson's wager deals with the fine-tuning problem and how we reconcile three of the most common ways that people try and explain it. So it basically, reconciles the fact that we exist, and our universe has hard universal laws and precisely tuned universal constants that allow us to exist. And the common statement about this is something like, if the gravitational constant were altered by 1 part in 10 to the 40th power, then stars and life would never form. So it's very, very finely tuned. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it was created, but it is very hard to explain. Uh, so there's three common ways that people try and explain this. These are the ones I'm aware of and the ones that I think have the most backing. So option one, God or gods created the universe, right? It was designed like a watch, very finely tuned, all the gears working together perfectly. Uh, it seems pretty intuitive, and we create things, and we can make very complex things, and nature kind of struggles to do the same thing, depending on your viewpoint. Option two, the alternative viewpoint, is that, yeah, we exist and we're pretty complex, but evolution says that we are just one of many infinite configurations and across infinite time. And the universe is the same way. So at some point, or across a multiverse, all physical laws and parameters are randomized, and we just happen to exist or survive in one that, like the lucky one, or one of the lucky ones. And most of the time, there's absolutely nothing. And option three is the universe is just a brute fact, the only one that exists and will exist. Now, option two probably justifies a little explanation if one is not familiar with it. Options one and three are pretty explanatory. Everyone knows these. Option two cleverly explains our existence in randomness through survivorship bias. So in World War II, the Allies were trying to figure out how to improve their bombers because they would, do air raids over Germany, get shot at with a ton of flak, and it was very dangerous. So they got a bunch of engineers together and they plotted where the bullets hit on the bombers that came back. And they were like, well, these are the areas that are most likely to be hit, clearly. So we should reinforce these areas. But this guy, Abraham Wald, was like, no, the planes that got shot in the other places didn't come back. So we should definitely reinforce the bulletless areas, because clearly if you get shot here, or in the engines, right, like, you don't come back, you crash, and everywhere else is fine. So the universe could be the same way, that we just happen to exist in a lucky one, and we think it's significant because we exist, but it's actually just randomness and like survivorship bias. So this explains why universal constants are tuned to really odd values, or the emptiness of the universe. So I don't know about you, but if I could design everything, I would like it to have, like really even numbers, and I don't know. I could see why this would seem odd. And also, the universe is very hostile by human standards, outside of Earth and even on Earth. Anyway, so option three isn't great. It has no explanatory power. It halts all further investigation. It might be congruent with Occam's razor, but kind of subjectively. This would be like accepting that a car came into existence fully built, and that's the only thing that has ever existed and will ever, that just doesn't make sense. It's like, oh, the car is the only thing that can exist. It's like, no. And at least option two has explanatory power and references observable phenomenon. So here's the hidden wager, right? So option three is off the table. We've got one and two. Option two stands out from a rational and empirical standpoint. However, it makes a very high stakes wager. It rests on the idea that our universe is the product of infinite random laws and constants and infinite time. So that means that there is a hidden wager that is being made, that across infinite possibility and time, a God-like entity can't or does not exist. So this is pretty significant because infinite mechanics and time should eventually give rise to a mechanism that allows extreme ordination of reality. So in our reality, there's this thing called entropy, and it seems like it's pointing to the universe being heat dead and like dark and really far apart. But if we assume randomization of laws and parameters, right, there might not be a entropy in the next universe or the universe before it or a universe infinitely many back. It might actually be very reasonable for an entity to have the capacity to control a reality or to create new ones, right? And so it's literally infinite possibility across an infinite time. And to say this entity doesn't exist yet means you're making a bet that something hasn't happened over infinite time and potentiality backwards. So there's infinite time backwards. Something hasn't happened, right? That's not a great bet. And it also means that even if this entity doesn't exist now, if it comes to exist later, infinite time forward, it can't affect me, right? So that means that betting across infinite possibility, retrocausal effects are impossible. And remember, we are presuming that it's totally random every time, that laws and like parameters are randomized, right? Time might not even be like constant across all possible universes during the scrambling process. And these are not great bets, right? The former is statistically improbable, and the latter rests on the former, while betting something is impossible across infinite possibility. So an interesting convergence happens, right? 3 has no explanatory power. 1 and 2 is preferable over 3. God arguably introduces unnecessary complexity, though this is arbitrary, depends on who you ask. 2 is grounded in observable phenomenon. Rationalists and empiricists probably like this one. Option 2 still emerges into option 1. It's not guaranteed, but almost by infinite mechanics. And to say it can't is making a bet against the principles of option 2, that it's true randomness every time. To introduce constraints across infinite possibility requires going to option 3. It's like, well, why is there constraints across randomness? It's just how it is. It's like, that has no explanatory power, right? It's either truly random or not. And if it's truly random, it's probably not going to always be, right? So this works because the bar we're trying to meet is explain fine-tuning. This doesn't necessarily mean that this entity needs to be maximally powerful across all realities and possibility, right? It only needs to be transcendent to us. Though infinite mechanics prefer the emergence of such an entity, but we don't necessarily need to presume that. It's transcendent in our context, which is a much lower bar than maximal power across infinite potentiality. After all, the interesting thing about this situation is that an infinite possibility and randomness and rules will naturally select for entities that can halt or delay randomness converging on ones that are most capable of enforcing order. So if we imagine the reality is a product of a bunch of like dice rolls and scrambling of laws and parameters, entities that can delay the randomness are selected for. And across infinite time and possibility, there should be one that is most capable or asymptotically capable of enforcing order on the randomness. Because if it doesn't, it dies, right? So it kind of mirrors how life emerges in the theory of evolution, right? Like, there's like volcanic vents in the ocean and the first microbes form, right? It's chaos until it's not. Anyway, what does this mean? It just informs a move from a position of hard naturalism to perhaps agnosticism or deism. I'm not saying this is like Pascal's wager, where it's like, oh, you have to believe in Christ, right? Not a bad decision in my point of view, but this is all it means. I'm not going to press anything beyond that. If we assume our reality is the product of an intelligent mind, this is outside the wager. If we assume it's created, we can take a couple steps further and hopefully alleviate some initial concerns. These are absolutely debatable, but I do think they're worth considering. So the wager is over. The official wager is over. But there's a lot of questions that come from this. Like, it's like, number one, right? Even if our universe is created, the creator is probably ambivalent to us. So a lot of agnostics feel this way. They look at the world and they say, okay, well, maybe we are created, but life kind of sucks, and there's definitely evil in the world, and most of the universe is hostile to us, and we're all probably going to die if the sun explodes or a meteor hits us, right? God clearly didn't love the dinosaurs, so why are we any different? And that, maybe so, but we can at least take solace in the fact that creation takes some expenditure of effort. A truly ambivalent or isolationist entity would not have created anything unless it justified the effort. So at minimum, our existence is for some purpose, right? It's not purposeless. I can't prove anything, but if we imagine that our existence is like art, like a creation, we can learn about the artist from it. And so the defining feature of our existence seems to me to be that we have free will and can think, which is pretty significant and suggests we aren't merely like curios. Like, we're more than a painting, right? We have agency. So this leads to the second extrapolation of non-tyranny. So just because we are made by a creator doesn't mean it's loving. It might be tyrannical. So against this, we can see that we exist and seem to have free will. A maximally tyrannical entity would only permit mechanistic agents or not create anything at all. And this kind of just like goes to how we see tyranny in reality. It's like a tyrant really would not like to have to worry about his generals like doing anything except, like acting like robots, right? Which makes sense, right? So we have agency, and in all religions, humans pretty consistently don't do what they think God wants them to do. So yeah, we're allowed to do that. That's pretty significant. Furthermore, if there is a creator, it doesn't seem sadistic either. Now, there are certainly evil things in the world, and I say that from my perspective, but there are things that are definitely not pleasant, like suffering. But there's also happiness too. So it's not like maximally sadistic. A maximally sadistic entity would probably just like torture an entity and then like make it forget what it experienced and then torture it again, right? But like it's like no, there's actually lots of good in the world, and it gets better when more people choose to be good. It gets worse when more people choose to be bad, right? So that's pretty significant. It's like we have agency and we can use it to make the world a better place or a worse place. And most of our suffering, not all of it, but most of it, arguably comes from past decisions ourselves or others make. So this is kind of long-winded, but like it's like, well, you know, I didn't choose to get hit by a tornado, right? It's like that's fair, right? But in all fairness, right, the tornado didn't choose to be there. You chose to live in a tornado prone zone, right? Not to diminish the tragedy that anyone experiences in a natural disaster, but it is kind of like a downstream result of our agency. And it's not like the tornado's evil. Like if I stood under a rock and I let it crush me, the rock isn't evil, right? Technically, I can trace my agency back to the fact that I decided to stand under it. Now, I might not have known it was going to fall on me, but it's still like that's kind of just the reality we live in. We have constant uncertainty in everything, and we still have to make decisions. And sometimes we make the wrong one. But anyway, whatever the entity is, right, the creator, it honors our free will enough not to enforce good. We can choose to do evil. We can choose to hurt people. We can also choose to not hurt people. We can choose to give food to the homeless, right? So we can do both, and we can change our mind whenever we want. So it's hard to call our creator a tyrant in this case. Now, one could go to, oh, well, there's like, some religions enforce a particular afterlife and you burn forever if you don't, or you get a worse reincarnation. It's like, that's a different discussion, but at minimum, we can look at this, right? So in this life, based on what we can observe, we can do good and evil. We could talk about the afterlife and metaphysics in another video. But overall, whether there has only been God or random iteration, it is safe to wager with high probability that the universe was created. So this isn't Pascal's wager, right? Pascal's wager is game theoretic. It's not, there's no empirical backing. Person's wager is literally just like the ultimate empirical evidence is that we exist and there we can observe laws and constants that appear to be very precise. How do we explain this? Though extrapolation, considering creation takes effort and we seem to have free will, it seems there's purpose and agency in life. So it's safe to wager there's a creator. It's kind of safe to assume that there's purpose and agency. And both of this means that our numinous notion of the existence of God across human culture may not be totally unfounded, but reflect an empirical reality we can find more truth about. So beyond this point, again, all of this is just kind of agnostic deist. There is an asymmetry of historical evidence for potential revelations from this creator, which permits a singular conclusion. So from here, you can look at the evidence and basically say that, okay, there's probably a God. It seems to permit free will, and clearly there is some non-zero purpose. So a bunch of people claim to know something about it. What's the evidence behind that? So that's a different topic for a different video, but I hope you found this interesting, and I hope you have a good day. All right. See you.